Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, May 27th, 2014 Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Lindsay?
You say Lindsay?
Yes.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel?
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee?
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker?
Here.
Councilmember Freeman?
Here.
Councilmember Boger? Councilmember Polinsky?
I did hear from Karen, she expects to be here.
She's running a few minutes late. Brent will not be here for this meeting, but expects to be here for the 7 o'clock meeting. Are there any members of the public that would like to address council before we get started this evening? Oh. Don't be shy. Come on up.
It's a different configuration. It's like, where do I go?
Good evening.
Hi, my name is Dan Durenshire, and I'm a resident of Washougal. And I just want to mention again that I'm here on the issue of wanting to have a ceremonial prayer for the public meetings for the council. And I'm interested in your discussions of it. I hope there'll be some discussion of it today. And I encourage a vote to, or somehow to move this forward and to come to some consensus on how to implement something that's such a deeply practiced part of our heritage in this nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else that would like to comment to council? Okay. Possibly not your only opportunity at this meeting. Brings us to new business. We've got a presentation this evening from CTRAN on the Bus Rapid Transit project. Scott, Jeff, come on up. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thanks for the invite. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk to you. Thanks for the opportunity. A couple things. We want to talk a little bit about the service in Washougal, some recent changes, talk a little bit about our 2030 plan, but as you indicate, want to focus most of our attention on the CTRAN Fourth Plane Bus Rapid Transit project, which is going to have an important vote on the CTRAN board scheduled for July. So, Scott, take it away.
All right. So as we, I don't want to thumb too far. I think the most appropriate place to start is we do have a little handout for you. This is a CTRAN's system map that also has a free ride pass attached to it. So we definitely want to encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to take advantage of it, perhaps ride the local Route 92, or we also have primary connections on just about every one of our routes through the Fisher's Landing Transit Center as well. We've got our commuter express service, we have limited service going across the river, and then we have a number of local routes that serve that as well. So what you have there is CTRAN's system map with that ride ticket. If you need any help trip planning, don't hesitate to contact either Jeff or myself. We'll help get you to where you want to go.
Except maybe the Amtrak station.
Except maybe we already talked about before the meeting started. So yes, and we can talk more about that if you'd like. But we thought we would begin. Hi there. We thought we would begin with with really talking a little bit about that Route 92, because it's been out here in existence for a number of years. CTRAN staff in recent years has worked cooperatively with the city, with other interested stakeholders, to try to make some fine tuning adjustments to it. We believe that we're making progress along those lines. For a period of time, we also had the Route 41, which was that more limited connection into and out of Washougal. What we're now trying to do is to be able to increase some service on that Route 40, on the Route 41, by making those enhancements, and also with the different time points for the Route 92, and really focus on that Fisher's Landing connection that I talked about a moment ago. We're seeing some success. We do have some significant double-digit ridership increases on the 41, which is now kind of acting more like that express route to downtown Vancouver, which we're happy to see, and we continue to take a close look at it. Fortunately, we have the type of technology on our buses these days that gives us that precise data in passenger counts through the what we call APCs, the automated passenger counters. So we'll be able to keep a close eye and of course, we'll continue to work with the city on some of those adjustments as well. Just a little bit on C-Tran's 20-year plan. The C-Tran board back in 2010 adopted it after a pretty substantial community-wide process as well, where we work closely with officials here from Washougal and our cities throughout our service area. However, even though it's only been about 4 years, there's been a number of circumstances that are leading C-Tran to need to take another look at it. Most notable, as many of us know, the CRC project is no more, and that was a major assumption that was included in that 20-year plan document. So we also had planned increases for service out here in Washougal. So as we go forward and address the future, we plan to also engage the C-Tran board, most likely later this year, once the board composition review process has kind of resolved itself and we know who the C-Tran board members are going to be, that we'll begin in earnest taking a look at that 20-year plan. So that will present some opportunities. We're happy to come out as often or not often as you'd like, but certainly working with officials in Washougal to make sure we've got the right service plans for our local communities throughout the service area as we move forward through it. But primarily, what we're going to be talking to you about here this afternoon is one of the big projects that we still have planned to move forward, and that's the Fourth Plain Bus Rapid Transit Project. And while there's not necessarily a direct or even a substantial link with Washougal, it is interesting. We surveyed early on here a couple of years ago riders that were using the Fourth Plain route, which, by the way, is C-Tran's busiest route. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But there are 5% of the Route 92 riders that are actually transferring. It requires a double transfer to get to the Route 4. We think many of those are primarily Clark College students that are making that trip. And so there actually are a number of Washougal and Camas residents that are using that local connection to Fourth Plain. I mentioned Fourth Plain being our busiest route. We have over 6,000 riders or 6,000 trips per day on the route. It's about 30% of our total system ridership. At some point in their trip, they get on the Fourth Plain corridor. It is very busy. You can see from some of the onboard cameras on the buses, having standees at different points throughout the day is not uncommon. We also have a number of individuals using that service on a daily basis that have different types of mobility devices, wheelchairs that are boarding and walkers and that sort of thing. And what that results in with a frequent service with 15-minute headways, you have all of these passengers that are boarding. When you're talking about a wheelchair boarding, it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to board the chair and then to secure it in the bus itself, which impacts, not surprisingly, the schedule and really the schedule reliability. So a couple of years ago, first the Vancouver City Council, followed by the C-Tran Board of Directors, after about an 12 to 18 month process, selected the bus rapid transit alternative as the preferred option for the corridor. This is a slide that kind of helps indicate one of the reasons why BRT was selected as the preferred mode, and you can see the different categories. First, kind of focusing on that left column, our current service that we offer today. About 45%, almost half of the time, we're traveling between Vancouver Mall Transit Center and downtown Vancouver. 36% of the time, the buses are stopped loading and unloading passengers. Excuse me. And then about 19% of the time, we're stopped in traffic. When you compare that to what we see with the BRT alternative on that corridor, you can still see the travel time doesn't change. We're still 45% in travel time. The reason for that is this project does not assume building any kind of a dedicated fixed guideway lane just for the buses. We're in mixed traffic. And that will continue to be the case with BRT, which also helps bring down the capital costs, which are important, an important consideration as well. Yet you see the big difference here is in the loading and unloading, the 36% current down to about 21%. So one of the features, and we've got a slide on here that helps illustrate it here a little bit better, but you've got level boarding, and you also have off-board fare collection, which are two of the components that really give you the travel time savings that we're seeking with this project. And then we do
Level boarding, meeting wheelchairs and stuff can just roll right on. They
on.
don't need lifts or any of that?
Correct, and there's also the self-boarding option with how the buses are constructed. They're rear-facing, which you see in just about every BRT system in the United States. You don't have to have the secure strap tie-downs on those as well, so you give the passengers that option as well.
When you say it's rear-facing, does that mean
It is.
if they're in a chair, they go in backwards? What do you mean by rear-facing?
They can roll in. I don't know if we have a good picture. You know what we could do is provide you, if you'd like, we could follow up some pictures of some of the BRT buses that are in operation today. I'm visualizing the one down at Lane Transit in Eugene and how they have that area on the bus reserved for those.
It means they're looking toward the rear of the bus. Their back is towards the
Oh, once
Yeah.
they're on the bus.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Because
on
I
the
drive
bus, and then there's a
special ed
wall
bus.
behind them, so if there's a crash
it.
or something, they go against the
They go.
wall.
I drive special ed bus and they have to go onto the ramp backwards, and so I just automatically went
Oh, okay.
to my world of buses. Thank you.
good.
A
So,
related world, but not exactly.
exactly.
Right.
Why is there a difference in stopped for traffic? What
Yeah.
is the bus rapid transit? Why does it
There's,
change that?
yeah, primarily, one of the advantages here is that we would also be implementing what we call TSP or Transit Signal Priority along that corridor as well. So that would give the buses at stations that are close to the intersections the ability to get through the intersection in a preferred way. Maybe there's an extended green for a few seconds to allow the bus to clear the intersection. Or in some cases, we could even have some queue jump lanes at the busiest intersections along the corridor as well that would give the bus the advantage and a green light to go first.
So basically, when you're traveling fourth plane, you should always be beside a bus.
Bus.
And you
Yeah.
get through those lights.
We were in front of the Battleground City Council last week, and we had a council member suggest that very thing. So, yeah.
What was I gonna ask? You're not gonna put those on the buses that are there now?
That are- The transit signal priority?
Yeah.
Well, we actually have it on the Mill Plain. We just launched in the Mill Plain corridor. We have it on for our existing fixed routes right now. So that's the project that's still kind of in its infancy, but we're beginning to see how it can and should work for the Fourth Plain corridor as well.
So with or without bus rapid transit, you would still have that?
We, with or without bus rapid transit on Fourth Plain? Not
Well,
necessarily on Fourth Plane, we have
on
it on
the
Mill
system,
Plane
I mean.
today, but we have it, yeah, we have it on the system, and it would have to be a separate project that's funded, differently, were the BRT project not to happen.
Okay.
So this next slide here is that 20% travel time savings that we reviewed here just a moment ago results in a lower annual cost for the service. What the BRT would be doing is it would be replacing the Route 4 and the Route 44, which are the two routes that we have operating on the corridor today. And we would also be, I mentioned the 15-minute headways for the current service on the Fourth Plane corridor. In the peak hours, the BRT would actually be serving the corridor with 10-minute frequencies. 15-minute would be in the off-peak hours. But because we have that 20% travel time savings, that results in a lower ongoing operations and maintenance cost to the tune of over close to $550,000. We are projecting, with the modeling work and the analysis that's been done, an increased ridership that you see really kind of throughout the country that can vary anywhere between 30 and close to 100% increases in ridership So we're projecting some increased fare revenue from that ridership as well. And then that third column at 124,000 is some of our, what we refer to as our non-operating cost savings, which is the amount of time it takes for drivers to get from, let's say, the administration facility today to the stop that we have up the road on 4th Plain at 65th, instead of having to travel to the mall. It also represents the opportunity to redo our Vancouver Mall Transit Center, which we have a little bit more information in here on, but it would allow us to get out of our existing lease that we're doing for our customer service facility there as well. So you add all of those different components together, and we're projecting about or close to $900,000 in annualized O&M savings compared to what we're spending for the 4 and the 44. This is actually just a visual that helps better than Scott's words kind of describe what some of the primary features and benefits of the stations are. You do have enhanced stations with longer shelters and to give passengers more protection, but really one of the primary features is that level boarding station. So these platforms are raised; they're a little bit higher than you see in your existing bus stops today, and then the buses are designed to be able to have that level entry, that level boarding that really results in a lot of benefit. We'd be operating it beginning very early in the morning, before 5 a.m. and well past midnight. On weekdays, we're assuming a local fare that we currently use, what we call our C-zone fare. So it would be a local trip. And then there's just a number of other components that would probably take a little bit too long to mention, although we do want to make note of the fact that these are longer buses, articulated buses, 60 feet compared to the 40-foot buses that we have operating on the corridor today. So you have, not just increased frequency with 10-minute headways in the peak hours, but you also have the opportunity to carry more passengers, which would deal with some of the crowding issues that we have on our 40-foot.
And fare payment takes place on the platform, so the driver doesn't have to deal with handling fares. That speeds up the operation as well.
Yeah, and I've seen some different figures, but between maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of our passengers are pass holders. They don't put the cash into the fare box every time they get into the bus. They have the monthly passes that we see, which will kind of aid that. But there will be ticket vending machines on each platform as well for passengers that are paying by cash to be able to do that.
Did you state a percentage? I didn't catch it, if you did.
Well, I've seen statistics, now it's been a while, and since I've been away, I probably need a
Hasn't
refresher,
changed
but
that
it's
much.
probably, wouldn't you say, Jeff, it's about, I don't know if it's 3/4
About
or
70% are pass
70%.
holders.
So this is really just a map of the project as the LPA was, locally preferred alternative, was approved. And really what this corridor is between, it operates between Westfield Vancouver Mall and downtown Vancouver. This map actually has all of the different stations that have been identified to have that BRT station treatment to it. And what we've done here for purposes of trying to kind of pare down this presentation is kind of focus on the 4 main geographies, beginning with the mall and then working our way westward to downtown Vancouver. I mentioned the Vancouver Mall Transit Center. Just as the Fisher's Landing Transit Center and Park and Ride is key for so much of the service and the transit trips that generate out of Washougal and Camas, the Vancouver Mall Transit Center also serves that same or similar function. We don't have a park and ride facility out there like we do at Fisher's, but we do have a number of local routes that feed into this facility. Since CTRAN began service way back in the 1980s, we had that transit center platform on the north side of the mall where it exists today. What we're proposing to do as part of the project, and we continue to engage in a really productive manner with mall management, we're looking at moving that bus platform from its current location on the north side that takes more time to travel to, quite honestly, as well as pulling into the parking lot and back out, to doing something on the south, what we call the ring road, which you see kind of depicted on the aerial shot right here. And then we would be providing our transit passengers with a covered walkway to the mall entrance. So what it would do is a couple of things. One, it would realign in part that ring road on the south end to abut more closely to SR 500. That would allow some of the parking spaces that would be consumed by the platform on the south end to be replaced, particularly those extra spaces you can kind of see drawn in there in front of Sears. The other important component here is that we would be installing a traffic signal at that southwestern quadrant, where today it's a two-way stop, and then you have the folks coming in from the outside. It's essentially a free flow for those trips as well. The mall responded very well, as you might not be too surprised. The traffic modeling that was done, we did it to represent conditions in the peak time, which is just a week or so before Christmas. And what it showed is that on average, it wouldn't just be a benefit for the buses to be able to get in and out, both BRT and local buses, but it also helps clear the queue for the automobiles during those most peak intense times throughout the year. So we are proposing to put a traffic signal in there as well.
Good question.
Yes.
Yeah, is that a walkway, the little orange line going
Yes.
from the, okay, that's.
So that would
Is that
be-
protected?
That would be our covered walkway that
Oh,
we're
okay.
proposing to build. We found, maybe imitation really is the sincerest form of flattery, but there are other BRT projects that have been constructed in recent years. In fact, down in Eugene, they did something similar. Having the mall always has been, and I think to a certain degree always will be, a pretty large trip generator for transit. And it's not just BRT on Fourth Plain, but a lot of our local routes are carrying people not just to shop, but to work there as well. And so what we want to make sure we're able to do by putting the transit facility, if you will, further out from the mall entrance, make sure we give passengers and customers that are going in there, knowing what weather's like around here for most of the year, the opportunity to get in and not be too inconvenienced by the elements. We're actually going to jump to Clark College, as that also is a major trip generator for people on transit. What we're proposing to do is to have two stations along Fort Vancouver Way, one on the north end, and this visualization, that smaller picture in the upper right corner, is the new STEM building that Clark College will be breaking ground on beginning in August, that will be going in. So Geyser Hall's kind of on the other side of Fort Vancouver Way. We would have a station on the north end kind of serving those two destinations, and then a second station a little further south on Fort Vancouver Way. And we've been in conversations, obviously, with Clark College from the very beginning in terms of designing this and finding the right station locations. And some of the early discussions had the potential for center running stations along that corridor, given the width of the street. However, based on a number of factors from safety to cost, we have determined that it makes the most sense, and the college is with us on this as well, to go and stay on side running or stay with side running stations throughout the entire project corridor. So at one time we were thinking this might be an opportunity to do some center running stations, but recent plans have kind of gone back to side running. So we'll have side running stations throughout the entire corridor as well. And then this is a real fun map, right? But this is really just to give you an idea that downtown Vancouver, we have a significant number of local bus stops that are kind of depicted in the green here. And identifying those key BRT stations became more of a priority, particularly with the CRC project being no more. The early assumptions had been that the BRT buses could use those same light rail stations, and you'd have some economies of scale and really good transfer opportunities by utilizing those stations with that project no more. We have been going through the process of siting separate BRT stations throughout downtown. And we still have that same kind of couplet concept, but the station locations for BRT are kind of depicted in the purple and the red. We have most of them solidified at this point. There's one station where you can kind of see the small oar with the arrows pointing in either direction. And that's really indicative of where it makes the most sense to put the local bus stop versus the BRT bus stop, because we want to make sure we've got good transfer opportunities for all of our local routes to serve downtown Vancouver as well. So, funding, everyone's favorite subject. Wanted to talk a little bit about this because the plan right now, we have been going through this Federal Transit Administration, what's referred to as a small starts process, in order to give this project the best opportunity at maximizing federal funding to help us build the capital construction component of the project. And we did learn here just recently in the last couple of months that we have been included in the FTA Small Starts report, which is kind of another way of saying that in the President's budget is a recommendation for $38.7 million, which when combined with the $4 million CMAQ federal funding represents an 80% federal funding to pay for the capital construction portion of this project. The current project estimate is $53.4 million. That will be updated as the project reaches what we kind of refer to as the 60% design, although as that work continues, it's looking more and more like we're going to be very close, maybe a little bit above or maybe a little bit below that $53.4 million mark. So we think from a project costing standpoint, we're not going to see a lot of variation from there. And with that 80% federal funding, that really is made because of the FTA. In fact, a couple of interesting points is, of all the small starts projects around the country that we're competing with, none of them received a higher rating, what we call kind of a medium-high rating from FTA, but none of them received a higher rating than our project. And so we think, it's a really good indication that we're scoring not just very well, but we're competing and, in fact, exceeding a lot of our competition around the country, which it's not easy to go get these funds, as you probably can imagine.
So nobody scored higher, but there's others that would have
There's
scored
others.
the
There
same.
are two. I believe there were two others out of a total. Actually, I think I've got them here. There were 6 or 7 projects, and there were 2 others that had that same ranking. But then the 7 small starts projects that were authorized to enter project development last year when the FTA authorized us to go forward. Ours is the only one. There's one other in ours that were recommended for the FY 2015 funding recommendations. Now, it's worth noting here that even though this is very good news from the project standpoint, there still is the appropriation process that has to take place through Congress. And so it is possible, and we've gone back and have done quite a bit of research in terms of what have other projects done if Congress doesn't fund the FTA small starts or new starts program at the recommended funding levels. And what we could see happen is you could see a situation where instead of $38.7 million for FY 2015, it could be $25 million, and then in FY 16, then they make up that difference. Which, if that were to happen, which is kind of the worst case scenario, but if it were to happen, the construction is planned to take place over 2 fiscal years. So it wouldn't be a major obstacle for keeping this project on its current schedule.
Is that a guarantee that it would be funded the second year?
Well, there's no guarantee. There's some projects that can take, although they tend to be the more expensive ones. If you go look through an FTA New Starts project and Small Starts project history, you see those projects that are in the $500, $600, $700, $800 million range can be split out over many years. But given this is a relative, I don't want to say inexpensive, but it is from the FTA project standpoint for their new starts and small starts, it's a relatively small amount. And we've not seen or could find many examples where a project of this size is split out for more than a couple of years. So, yes.
I have a question about the FTA Small Start. You said it's a grant or a loan?
It is, it's a grant. It's a grant.
Does that grant require matching funds of any sort, or is it?
It does, and it's and in fact, that's where I was going to start kind of heading to a couple of things. Normally, what you would see even in a project like ours, if we were able to get an 80% federal grant, then the local match would be the remaining 20%. We, CTRAN here a couple of years ago, also applied for a state regional mobility grant, and were awarded the $3 million, which you can see depicted in the smaller kind of sliver there on the left. But what that allows us to do is kind of lower that 20% local match down to about 14%. So what we're projecting at this point is we would need a CTRAN local match of about $6.5 million to kind of fill that remaining gap. And that's the piece that we're preparing to take in the form of a recommendation to the CTRAN Board of Directors at our July CTRAN board meeting. And what we have that coming out of, or are proposing for it to be paid for by, is that section that we kind of refer to as CTRAN's uncommitted cash and investments. CTRAN, from its very first day until now, and even, you know, current plans well into the future, we have no debt. There's no bonds that we've let. We want to continue to be that pay-as-you-go agency, and so that has required sufficient cash reserves to be in hand over the years. And the way that we do our reserves today, we have a board-approved, a board-adopted policy to set aside a certain amount of operating reserves, which is the equivalent of 90 days cash on hand, which is about $9 to $11 million. We also have kind of a rolling 6-year capital improvement program. And our current capital improvement program, we have about $34 million in cash reserves that are dedicated to those projects as well. So the uncommitted cash and investments is even setting aside, you know, factoring out your operating reserves and your capital commitments for the next 6 years. We have, are projected to have close to $10 million, just under $10 million in that uncommitted cash and investments at the end of this year. So CTRAN staff's recommendation would be using 6.5 from that $10 million of uncommitted cash and investments to be able to fund that local share. So it wouldn't jeopardize any of the current capital projects, nor would it jeopardize service, given the savings, to any of the rest of the service that we currently provide throughout our service area.
Okay, so what do you consider a capital project if this isn't?
Well, and this is, but so each time CTRAN, we do a biennial budget. So every time the biennial budget is approved, we have an accompanying list of capital projects. They can be anywhere from purchasing replacement buses to new shelters to concrete pads for our stops. They could be updates to our maintenance and administration facilities as needed. So anything that were, you know, bus stop signs, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
You bet.
I'll wait till the end of your
Oh,
presentation.
did you want to? Okay, and actually, we're pretty much getting there. So what this last slide depicts here is kind of what we've termed our project milestones and critical decision points. And I mentioned that we're kind of hitting here soon. In fact, by the end of June, we're going to be at that 60% design completion, which will then give us that updated project cost estimate. So when we go to the CTRAN board in July, we'll have the latest financial information. And then that July board meeting is currently identified as the meeting where we'd be going to the board asking for the commitment of the local match that we talked about. And then should that be approved, that would set into place a series of actions that begin with negotiating that grant agreement, kind of the details of what that looks like with the Federal Transit Administration. We'd be completing final design later summer into the fall. And then later this year, even beginning to purchase the necessary right-of-way. We're not doing any kind of full property acquisitions. Just about everything we'd be doing would be sliver acquisitions along the corridor. We're also working towards some what we kind of call our third-party agreements, both with the City of Vancouver and Clark College, to take advantage of like the STEM facility that's going to be constructed out there, and being able to kind of minimize our local share costs for some of those by taking advantage of the construction that will be happening here soon. And then that sets into a series, a number of actions next year that kind of lead us into construction, including, procuring the BRT vehicles, procuring the construction manager and construction contractor, with construction beginning summer of 2015 and concluding in the summer of 2016. And with that, kind of concludes our presentation. We'll be happy to answer any more questions you may have.
Dave?
You projected $205,000 of additional revenue from the BRT project. What was the methodology for that?
That was based on our current C-zone fare, factoring the, I believe it's the 30%, is that right, Chuck? 30% increase. I'm sorry, I should have also introduced Chuck Green as our BRT project manager at C-Tran. Katie Bellicone is our community involvement coordinator. They've both been doing the lion's share of the work on this project. So if I turn to them, that's the reason
I'll stay up
doing
here,
that,
or you
so.
turn, in case you do turn.
So
So-
it's,
Well, just to answer that one quickly, we are projecting a 30% increase in ridership. And that 30%, when you include their 30% of new people paying fares, that's about a $205,000 increase per year in fare revenue. That 30% is actually on the conservative side, because we looked at about 6 or 7 comparable BRT projects around the country between when they opened and 1 to 3 years after. They typically found anywhere from 30 to 120% increase in ridership, an average somewhere in the 60 to 70% range. In fact, the use of the RTC travel demand model also indicated a higher increase, but we wanted to make sure we were conservative in our financials and our projections for this, so we could work with that.
Where were these projects located that you used as a baseline?
Kansas City,
Eugene?
Eugene was one, Seattle had Rapid Ride, Community Transit had Swift, although that's a little different than what we're using, so we looked at it, but I think another one was Minneapolis, and maybe Cleveland, I think, was one other one.
So the smallest of the sample that you picked is Eugene, which has a population of, what, 250,000?
The entire metro area is pretty comparable to the Vancouver area, maybe Vancouver's a little smaller than that. In the corridor, we were looking in the corridor, and not looking system-wide, but in the corridor, the populations are actually comparable.
Between
We also,
Eugene and,
yeah, 'cause, actually, the Eugene corridor before had less riders than our current Route 4 along 4th Plain. So we wanted to look at the corridors and make sure they were comparable,
But-
somewhat factoring in. We didn't look at like Boston or New York, anything like that.
no, but you looked at Seattle.
We looked at Rapid Ride, which goes between Federal Way and Tukwila, and their ridership actually was less than what we have on the 4. Again, it's not the entire metro area, it's just the specific corridors. We wanted to make sure we were comparing things reasonably. And what we were looking at is the percentage growth, not the actual numbers or densities in the urban areas.
And then maybe just a couple of additional points to that. The methodologies and the analysis that was used as part of the FTA small starts process, those are all very carefully reviewed by the FTA and have to be signed off on even before we run any of those analyses.
I'll save, you can save your breath if you're trying to convince me that we
Oh,
should
no, I'm
rely
not.
on the federal government for any kind of methodology.
Okay.
Well, and actually, this was not the federal government methodology. reviewing our work to make sure it's consistent with what they're expecting in order to give us the Small Starts grant.
I understand.
We used data from the National Bus Rapid Transit Institute, and we also actually did our own homework by contacting King County Metro and going down to Eugene to update the numbers that were published by the National Bus Rapid Transit Institute. It also was reviewed by an expert review panel that we had in town a couple of years ago that have their 5 people around the country who deal with transit projects or financials or ridership projections, and so they were there to kind of review our work. But we actually created our own methodology based on using the existing data.
The people you're referencing don't give me a lot of confidence in your methodology, but I'd like to sit down with you and take a look at that.
I'd be more than happy to, and I can even point you afterwards. We can point you to the work that was done in our alternatives analysis report that did that comparison.
Okay, 2 more questions if I might. After the Bus Rapid Transit project is implemented, how much of C-Tran operations will be funded from fare revenue for all of C-Tran? This is going to make an improvement.
Well, and actually, I'm going to break that down into two things. One is we track our fare box recovery ratio on a system-wide basis, and that's part of what we report to the Federal Transit Administration. Right now, that's about 24-25%. We're projecting with the increased ridership, increased fare revenue, and actually reduced costs, the 800 and something thousand reduced operating costs, the fare box recovery ratio system-wide will actually increase by 1%. We're talking the entire system. On the Fourth Plane corridor, right now we're running about 28 to 29% fare box recovery. It's a well-used corridor. With the increased ridership and fare box, or excuse me, the reduced costs, we're looking at that fare box recovery going up to at least 33% and likely higher.
Is that system-wide or just?
That's just on the corridor. System-wide, we're looking at about a 1% increase from the current 24-25 to about 26% when we factor in all the riders in C-Tran, all the costs, and all the revenue.
So roughly 3/4 of your system is being subsidized by somebody.
That's pretty
The locals.
common around the country. There's actually only 2 systems in the world that return more from their fares than they actually cost. That's both are in Asia.
Last question.
Wait, where did you say that the 3/4 comes from,
The 3/4 of,
the fare recovery?
most of it is through the local sales tax
Sales
that's
tax.
been voter approved. Yeah, there's some other, bus advertising, there's some smaller components there as well, but primarily through local sales tax.
Thanks for repeating that. I
Yeah.
did that mainly for the audio because all 3 of you said something at the same time and I barely heard it, so I appreciate that.
Last question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. The Van Mall project adds a traffic signal at a key intersection. That is the key intersection going into that
Yes.
facility. And takes parking places to construct a bus platform and a covered walkway. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a great idea, but if you could turn to that picture again, Scott. A couple of things at play here. One is by taking out the existing transit platform on the north side of the mall, we're actually returning 50 parking spaces back to Westfield. That's where the Cinetopia, and actually they have some additional plans for that north side.
Way to go.
So on the south side, what's hard to see in this picture, and we can actually definitely send you a kind of a blow-up of this, we are, by realigning the ring road, we're actually giving Sears a net gain of 35 parking spaces, just the way it laid out.
Terrific.
Not that we're trying to subsidize Sears or anything, but it's just the way it penciled out. The impact is really to Westfield. They're losing in this design a net of about 50 parking spaces. However, where that signal is, their current site plan has a roundabout. And a roundabout in their site plan would take about 50 parking spaces. The signal actually works better in this context than a roundabout. When we ran the traffic models, it reduced, the signal reduced the queues pretty substantially. So the backups on the off-ramp from 500, the backups leaving the mall, coming into the mall were substantially reduced. Not having to do that roundabout saves them 50 parking spaces. So it's pretty much a net zero, net neutral situation.
And whose model are you using there?
We're using something called VISIM. So what we did was we took some traffic counts in the holiday season last December 2013. We actually increased them by about 5% because we're not building the project in December 2013. We're building the project and opening it in 2016. So we're assuming that the mall is going to expand a little bit. They do have some plans. That traffic in general would just grow over time. So we plugged in those traffic numbers based on the existing counts, a 5% increase, and then use that VISIM traffic simulation model, which actually show under the different options how traffic would flow.
Okay, I'd like very much to look at the assumptions on that model.
Sure.
I'd love to sit down and pour over that with you. The reason for my concern here.
I'm a traffic engineer, and so I'm kind of a geek that way, but it's going to be pretty boring stuff. So if just to give you a fair warning.
I'm prepared to be bored.
Okay, then I can bore you.
My concern is this. Vancouver Mall competes with Portland, which has no sales tax. So if you want people to come to your mall here in Washington and pay the sales tax, you have to make it convenient for them. That means free parking. And you have to have enough of it. I don't know how much there is out there, whether it's adequate or not. I've never had a problem finding a parking place, although on occasion I did have to hunt. But that's my concern.
Mm-hmm.
I want this place to be competitive and to have a clientele. The clientele that uses that comes mainly from Clark County. And they don't ride the bus to get there because the bus doesn't come from where they are.
And the people who are mostly concerned about that are the Westfield Corporation, and that's who we're working with. They've seen the traffic model. And so that's where they're moving ahead. They're actually working right now with their anchor tenants to gain agreements for this change, because it does change the parking a little bit as far as the layout. But as far as Westfield's concerned, we've got nothing but positive feedback from them moving ahead with this.
Well, the good news is that if somehow the Vancouver Mall loses its business, then we have an opportunity here in Washougal to attract it. So it may not be all bad.
Paul?
Oh, go ahead, Connie Jo.
Okay, thanks. Well, since we're on this slide, one of my questions or concerns was that the drop-off point right now is much closer to the actual building, and now it's all the way across the parking lot. And I have bad knees, so when I go to the mall, I want to park as closely as I can, because then you're going to walk the whole distance downstairs and upstairs and then back to your car again. And I see that, one of the most important people that we serve are the disabled. And so they're going to get off at the farthest point away from the mall itself and then have to traverse the entire parking lot before they even get the pleasure of getting inside and shopping. So I
Uphill?
totally understand.
Uphill?
Uphill. The ramp? What's
From the
uphill?
bus platform to the mall, I think, is uphill.
There's a slight incline.
Slight incline.
Yeah,
If you're pushing a wheelchair, there's no such thing as a slight.
I know.
So that's, and I realize, all the other factors, but again, the disabled and some of those folks with learning disabilities too struggle with that. So I just want to express that because my colleagues weren't there when I talked about it at CTRAN.
Paul?
Just a curiosity, really, more than anything. What kind of vehicles are we talking about? Diesel, electric, overhead wires?
Yeah, actually, we're looking at electric hybrids, diesel electric hybrids, 60-foot articulated buses as well. So in fact, it's kind of interesting. I know I've heard Chuck use this before as well, but the technology that's out there today will actually allow the buses to go into full electric mode for a period of 2 to 3 minutes.
Well, up to 2 miles.
Or up to 2 miles.
And it's called hush mode by the
Right.
vendor. So it's similar to like a Max train as far as it very quiet. Not too quiet, but quiet enough that you wouldn't even notice it. And we're actually looking at possibly using those in a couple of areas with more populated areas.
I was just curious because I spent years in Boston and San Francisco where they have rubber-tired electric trolleys.
No, it's not the design here.
Other questions? I've got one for whoever can answer it. So you've got a $53.4 million price tag, basically, to get the thing up and going. Does anybody know what I assume the three biggest parts of that are the actual equipment, the buses, the construction of your platforms and your stop areas, and then all of this reconstruction at the mall area?
The mall, and there's also some improvements and expansion of the maintenance facility, C-Trans maintenance facility, to be able to work on the longer buses. And then the stations along the corridor at that point where we've got the stations identified, they'll have, yeah.
And we actually do have a breakout of that, which is percentage by the different components we can send afterward.
Does anybody know what the cost is out of that just for the buses themselves?
They're close to.
It's about a little over $10 million. 10 buses, about $1 million each.
So that's really your number that is, everything else is, other than maintenance and operation, is a one-time expense.
Yeah, for the capital, the capital construction side to get it up. That's correct.
And
How long do these
what's the
buses
life of
run?
one of the buses?
They are, well, at least 12.
We're aiming, actually, the BRT agencies around the country are aiming for 16 years for their articulated buses because it is a more substantial expense. Currently, we're looking at 12 to 14 years typical for our 40-foot buses that they would replace. And one thing that in our Federal Transit Administration application, we've actually had to amortize all of these costs, so it has factored in replacement over time of the different articulated buses.
So the decision that the C-Tran board is approaching is that in July, the board will be asked to commit that local match, that $6.5 million, and then to instruct staff to begin to work on the finalization of an agreement with the Federal Transit Administration for those funds. It locks in their commitment and locks in our commitment.
Is so another question out of that then, the $700,000 you've got for the 13-14 budget, is that actual cash or is that in-kind staff working on the project?
That's substantially C-Trans local share to the planning effort that's currently underway.
Okay.
We've been starting with the alternatives analysis, taking us through final design.
But it's not actual money that you're going to take and put into the capital project itself?
No,
It's not
although
Money
Sure.
we've already spent to,
Okay,
Yeah, but it is also includes that 53.4 million.
It gets you
assumes
a portion of
that's
that.
part of
The,
it, yeah.
the one thing I want to point out with that pie chart is because the way FTA operates, we're dealing with the federal government, money we've already spent is still included because that's all part of the
Right.
project. So that 700,000 is being spent right now to match the CMAQ dollars that we're using for the design work.
okay. Thank you. Dave?
Just thought of another. What's your ridership from Washougal on the two routes? Daily ridership?
I couldn't break it out on a daily. We could get you like the monthly ridership reports. We could break it up by month if you'd like that. We could certainly
That'd be
send it to you.
great.
Would that be,
We only have
Yeah.
one now.
okay?
Say
We
again?
only have one route now.
The 92. Yeah.
92?
41 was
Yeah.
done away with.
Okay.
I'd like that also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
thanks for the
Right, thanks.
opportunity.
You bet. Chuck, thank you for coming along as well.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Chuck.
Mrs. Forsberg. So let's talk our money. We can't get any of C-Trans money. Let's talk about our own money.
See you guys.
Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Welcome back.
start at the end.
You started,
Yeah. Any questions?
it's a very good place to start.
Okay, tonight, we're going to talk about the first quarter update. And just a reminder, it's January through March, so for our property tax collections not coming till April and October, it's pretty boring of an update. But there are a few things to discuss, just that differences between the 2 years. So we'll go over those. The first quarter revenues are at 14.2% of the budget. Property taxes are at 7.2 or 7.7% of the budgeted. And one thing to point out is that overall revenue is down from 2013, and I'm going to go over why with this screen up there. The utility taxes, you'll remember, we decreased the utility tax on water from 20.4 to 10%. So there's that decrease, and then there's also an offsetting decrease in expenses because we don't have the hydrant fees coming from the fire fund anymore. So that's kind of the biggest difference there under utility taxes. We also learned, putting together our presentation, that we did not receive a franchise fee from the Clark PUD. So they've sent stop payment and they're issuing us another check. So we will get that in the next few days. And we signed up for ACH deposits. We don't have to worry about checks getting lost in the mail anymore. So that's a positive. The next biggest decrease is in the state shared revenues, and that's where we code the wildland fire reimbursements. And so in 13, we'd had some of those totaling about $62,000 in the first quarter from the prior year. And then this year, we didn't receive any wildland reimbursements in the first quarter. So it's actually up about $12,000 in the state shared revenues when you look at comparable by pulling that one out. And that's about the biggest players in the differences there. So overall, we're doing well. We're tracking along the budget. With the property tax numbers coming in April, we'll have a better feel for how that's doing in the next quarterly update. But you can see that retail sales tax, criminal justice tax is about 25% of the budget. The utility taxes are right about where we budgeted, and same with some of the other taxes. Ooh, maybe, can't see it, okay. So we're doing well. It's pretty status quo.
The thing that stands out to me is subdivision zoning and planning fees went up substantially, and there's a significant piece of the first quarter budget.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Mitch knows ballpark how many permits we've issued?
I don't have the numbers for April, but as of March, it was 44 is where we were.
Which is,
That was up considerably.
if I remember right, we did 54
I was
last
gonna
year.
say, I think we did a little over 50 for the whole year last year.
Yeah, thank you.
So things are moving well. On the expense side, we're right along in the budget as well at 21.3% on the general and street fund. Pretty expected there. Again, we had the election costs for 13 come in at the end of the month of June, so that's why the council budget is at 36%. It's just that expense came early, so it looks like in the first quarter that you're off track, but you're not. You're right, along according to schedule. And then you can see that between years, the fire department is less from last year at the same time. Moving to the utility funds, we're right on track for those as well. The water sewer revenues are at about 22.6% of the budget. Stormwater is at 23.9% for revenues. The expense side, we're tracking about the same, 20% for expenses, 16.8% for stormwater. So a nice little picture of that. We're tracking right along with what we budgeted. And the stormwater looks the way it does because that's how the rate analysis went. So we're tracking along according to that.
Yeah. I didn't look at the numbers. My memory is that a whole lot of the stormwater budget is mowing and cleaning swales, and that's something you would do second and third quarter, not first.
Right. We do budget for additional seasonal work in the stormwater budget. I think it's roughly $48,000 for that line item.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That brings us to these. We're trying to get them to fit even better on the screen. Again, you can see that the general and street fund is currently in the first quarter at a deficit status between revenues and expenses, and that's just due to timing of the property taxes. The rest of the ones that you'll see that are in a deficit status are because they're the capital project funds that are budgeted that way because the revenues are front-loaded typically. So for instance, the transportation capital fund, we're spending the fund balance, which is what we anticipated for those projects, and then we get reimbursed if we have grant projects such as CDBG for sidewalks and those types of things. Waters, the Fund 413, the 507,000, again, is the capital project fund for the bond that we issued back in 11. So we're just spending down those bond proceeds on the capital projects that were in the plan for water, sewer, and storm. And then the employment security, again, we spend fund balance because that's how that fund operates. But other than that, the rest are going according to plan, or they're all going according to plan. That takes us to our massive earnings from our local government investment pool. They are lower than this point last year, but Wells Fargo has actually, our current bank, has a money market option that will give us a higher rate and still be very liquid, and we can transfer between our checking and our savings, subject to the 6 transfers per month, so we'll have to think of that. But we've moved some of the LGIP in there to see how that plays out, to see if we can earn a little bit more money versus.
I don't really need to ask, but that's consistent with state law.
Yes, as long as it's federally insured
Thank you.
and within the state of Washington.
It's a money market fund that's federally insured?
Through Wells Fargo.
Thanks.
Surprises me.
Technically, it's a money market savings account.
Correct.
That's, okay, thank you.
So it's, yeah. It just gives you a little higher rate of return. So here's the corresponding citywide profit that we've received from our local government investment pool for the months of January, February, March. Then we have the longer-term bond projects, or bond funds with investments. We're getting down to where the only bond for the bond that we issued, we were investing those in these longer terms, but we've since let those expire so that we can use the money for the projects. So this is truly what we'll have moving forward for our longer term investments with the general fund, the water sewer fund, and then the bond reserve funds we don't touch till the end of the life of the bond that we issued. So our portfolio is doing pretty well, earning what we can. So that's it. We're tracking right along according to our budget. We're doing well. Sales tax is coming in strong. Building is going great. Got it? Questions, comments?
Finger in the wind, have we seen any property tax revenues yet?
I haven't looked at them,
Okay,
but I can send out an email and let you know how we did.
great,
I mean, I know I saw large deposits, but I didn't add them up.
thank you.
Our long-term financial status for the general fund, from the presentation that we were giving at the annual planning retreat back in January, do we have any updated projections?
We are currently working on those, and I think in the meeting in June, we're going to start bringing those forward for an update and where we're tracking with some of the projections that we're starting to get for different trends for the rest of the year. So we are in the process of updating that information.
I know you're not our IT girl anymore, but these things aren't locked. Let's check this out. I go to enlarge it and then it's off the screen and then I could manipulate the whole thing.
You shouldn't be able to manipulate the numbers, but maybe
I know.
the size of the picture.
I know, but it's frustrating. I go to manipulate the screen and it's,
It is
freaking me
a
out
picture
here.
of the spreadsheet, so
so.
now
I
you
don't know.
magically made it disappear.
I have talent. So, I don't know, is that a Theo thing? Or is that, what is that?
It might be how you opened it.
I opened it in Keynote.
You did?
because
I don't
it's
know,
a-
I'll have to look
It's
into
a
it.
PowerPoint.
Let's let you ask Jen that after.
Okay, I just want
after
to,
the
if I
meeting,
don't say
'cause
it
I'm gonna try
now,
and get through these as quickly as we can.
yeah.
Any other questions on budget updates?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dave, council vacancy, which really isn't a vacancy yet.
Yes.
Karen, right?
I see someone sitting in
Sorry.
that seat.
So as you know, Councilmember Plinsky has tendered her resignation. This is actually her last work session, and she's resigning effective at the end of the month. And so your rules are intact and in place and very specific and precise in giving direction to the team here about how we are to proceed. And we have already initiated your rules and are soliciting applications. There's a minimum 3-week period where those are to be open. And then we are directed in your rules to be as expedient as we possibly can to get it applicant pool to you for your interviewing, evaluation, and ultimate appointment of a replacement. To accomplish that, we had originally looked at June 23rd. That would be the first regular council meeting that met your criteria. But that's problematic for at least one of you. And so we would like to essentially now just really do a schedule check and either arrive at a regular meeting. The next regular meeting after that is the second Monday in July. We could also entertain a special meeting just for that purpose. One that comes to mind is June has a 5th Monday, and June 30th is that 5th Monday, and you could hold a special meeting then, but we can wait until that regular meeting in July or do a special meeting or whatever is your pleasure.
So the person that's gonna be out of town, can't they just hop on the phone or? video?
The short answer is yes, the longer answer is longer. For things such as, and in memory, the last few appointments have gone into executive session.
Can't do executive session with the phone?
You can. Typically, we would just have to figure out how we do it. We'd basically probably end up booting everybody out of chambers instead of just council.
I think on our end, we can do it. The issue would be the other end of the phone, making sure that's secure for executive session.
I'm the one concerned. I'll be on the East Coast.
You're
Versus-
You're only a concern for that meeting. There are others that have concerns on other dates, so
Yes.
it hits more than one of you.
I thought we were only talking about this one.
You're not the only one gone on certain dates, so.
No, but I'm gone on this date. I thought our discussion here was this date.
No, it's to find a date, but it is true that you'll be absent on the 23rd. I'm not aware if anyone else is on
And
the
I'll
23rd.
be on the East Coast where 3 hours time difference makes a significant difference.
Be 10 o'clock.
I would also suggest that, frankly, there's a lot of interviewing that's looking in their eyes. So I would suggest that electronic attendance isn't the best way to do this.
Oh, you're so old-fashioned, and I just love you for it.
And,
Oh, there it goes again.
and, and secondly, I would say that any of the Mondays work for me.
I'm going to be out of town a lot in July, probably for 3 weeks.
How about 30 June?
But I could be here for 30 June.
Is June 30th problematic for anybody?
That'd work for me.
It'll be fine with me.
We just need to check in with Brent.
For a special meeting or for
Doesn't
moving?
work I can come if you
God,
like.
I did that
I'll
myself,
just sit
didn't
over
I?
there.
I'm sorry, are you talking about a special meeting?
It is a
in
special.
addition to the 23rd, or are you talking
Just
about
for
moving
kids.
the meeting from the 23rd to the 30th?
We wouldn't move any meetings.
No moving the meetings, just
This-
an
this
additional
is-
meeting.
This would be a
Correct.
special meeting
Just for that.
just for that.
Oh,
This is 30 June.
30 June, right, just the following week. Take advantage of the 5th Monday in June, which is normally a non-meeting.
So you just need to ask. And that will be the interview.
You can interview and appoint in the same night, or you can interview and then postpone appointment to a date certain or your next regular meeting, per your rules.
What time?
Time is at your discretion. Since it's a special meeting, you could meet earlier than your normal 7, or you could defer to 7, like a regular meeting.
Can we put on the next workshop agenda one of the rules that we've got, and that is the way we vote? Because I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
you can talk about that tonight as well if you'd like. I know that was a
just briefly.
issue
right-
at the last one.
Right now, you've got 15 points to distribute between two candidates, 10 and 5. 10 for first place, 5 for second place.
Right.
So if you don't have but one candidate that you want to vote for, you're wasting 5 points. If you allowed council members to have 15 points and distributed them the way they wanted, I think that would give them more flexibility and give you a truer result than wasting the votes of those who don't have a second choice, or who don't feel that there is a second choice.
I think you can also just vote for one. You don't, for first place, you don't have to vote for a second place.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
But then they
You end
don't.
up wasting 5 points.
Right.
Paul?
Not surprisingly, political scientists and mathematicians have spent a lot of time on this question. And the basic theory is, the way that works is what's called preference balloting. You put your first choice first on your list. You need not put anyone else on your list. However, if your first choice, what you do then is you take all of the first line choices, and the ones who got no votes or the least votes, you cross them off. Then for all of those who voted on the first line for that person, you look at their second line vote. And that becomes their vote. And you continue to do that until you have a majority. Any other method allows gaming, much as you described. And this pretty much eliminates the opportunity to game it. Preference balloting is used in a number of situations. I'm not aware of any state election system that uses it, but it's the preferred method for the people who spend their lives studying this question.
I'm not one of those.
Okay, let's back up just a minute. So if everybody is available on the 30th, let's check with Brent when he gets here, if he's available on the 30th, and do a quick update during the regular meeting this evening to confirm if that date will work. Is there a preference? 5, starting time, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock?
5 o'clock. It's my preference.
Yeah.
In deference to the people who are applying, who may have other jobs, I'd like to make it a little later. 6.
6 would be good.
The argument against that is,
They're gonna have to be here.
if you appoint them, they're gonna have to be here at 5 o'clock at the next week.
Yeah.
So,
This is a council meeting,
Mhm.
special council meeting.
Special council meeting.
Council meetings are generally at 7. I would suggest we have it at 7, for consistency's sake.
That's fine too.
I'm not working
okay,
during
so
that time.
for the moment, we're gonna
So,
point
matter.
towards June 30th at 7 o'clock. We'll double check with Brent and make sure that that works for him, and then from there. So, rules and procedures, do you wanna chat more about that? I can recall one of the, I don't even wanna call it an issue, one of the points that came out of the appointment of Councilmember Boger was, Dave, I believe it was you, but maybe not, out of that selection process, right now, we've got to go through 2 rounds. And it was so overwhelmingly lopsided, the question was, why do we have to go through 2 rounds? And you had to go through 2 rounds because your rules prescribe you've got to go through 2 rounds. So even as painful as it was having to re-vote again, do any of you have any desire to change that to where second time around? I mean, if it's 60 to whatever it is, that you've got the ability to just appoint someone by acclamation without having to go through the complete voting.
So I just would add that the way the rules are worded now, it provides a door for the council to walk through to do that. It prescribes this process, and then it says, unless the council changes it. And it doesn't require you to go back and change your rules because it's embedded in there. So if that happened, Mayor, then someone on the council could just assert that or make that motion, and the council could
You can just
proceed.
move for acclamation
You could just go for it, right?
if everybody's in agreement.
Right, so you'd have to, it'd be a two-step process. You'd have to get everyone, a majority of the council to agree to that procedurally, to not do a simple ballot for the top two. And then if everyone, or if a majority agreed to that procedurally, then you would vote on the acclamation.
My understanding of acclamation is that it's not just a majority, it's
Everyone.
everybody. Am I wrong on that?
That's correct. That's right.
May I say something here? Paul and I sometimes disagree, but tonight I've seen two examples of why I love having him on this council. He has a depth of knowledge, he brings to this job a depth of knowledge that I don't have on procedures and laws and processes and things like that, that I think is just invaluable. I still don't agree with you on the voting, but I just wanted people to know that. I appreciate you.
Okay, so are we good for now on council vacancy? Do we reconfirm during the regular meeting tonight?
Right, I'll chat with Councilman Boger and find out about that,
Okay.
his availability. And just for your reference, in your packet.
So in doing that, Jennifer, right now, what is your cutoff date for
The 18th.
applications? So let's go ahead and let's move your cutoff date back, since we basically are just picking up another week.
Okay,
So just move it a week from wherever it is now,
Okay.
the 25th,
18th.
it's currently at the 18th, so that'll push it to the
25th?
25th, the week before.
So just to comment to the council, I'm sure you all have access to your rules, but conveniently for you in the packet is Chapter 8 or Section 8 of your rules. And if between now and then you want to reacquaint yourself with the process, it's there for you to peruse. It gives a very excruciatingly detailed description of that top two voting process that you decided upon last time.
Any other questions on council vacancy for the moment? Okay. Moving to council meeting invocations.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, I'll make some brief comments and then I'll turn it over to our city attorney. At your last meeting, this was brought up and there was a request that we bring something for you to consider regarding this issue. This was in the wake of a recent Supreme Court decision on the question of invocations at public meetings in a specific city on the East Coast. So our legal team reviewed some documents from other communities and have put together this draft. So you have a draft resolution as well as some procedures that essentially are for the staff to implement on your behalf, but they become part of your resolution. And with that, I'll turn it over to Don. Again, the legal team put this together for your consideration. We would like feedback on this and some level of direction so we know what to do, whether to bring something back, this one, something different, and whether it's another workshop or for your action at some future point. Don?
Thank you, David, Mayor and Council. So we put together this resolution with Scott's help, and this is we crafted from different examples of Clark County has one, Longview had one, Yakima had one. We kind of melded what we thought was the best of all of them. Then we took a look at the recent Supreme Court case in Town of Grace versus Galloway, and looked what that called for there. And so, you know, that decision, just the guts of it said that. Just reading a little bit, it says the court does not imply that no constraints remain on its contents. Absent a pattern of prayer that over time denigrates, proselytizes, or betrays an impermissible governmental purpose, a challenge based solely on the contents of a particular prayer will not likely establish a constitutional violation. So what we tried to do in the resolution was keep it pretty neutral. I think what the court was concerned with was anything that might denigrate or proselytize. Those were the things that, the high points of what the court's decision were. So the proposed resolution is just a starting point for discussion. See what you guys want in there, that's in there, or what you may want out of there. The resolution can be amended, obviously, at the regular council meeting, and you can also choose not to have prayer at all still, so that would be an option as well. You're not required by the court's decision to implement something that would require prayer.
Council, comments, questions? Dave?
I've got a series of amendments that I'd like to propose for my colleagues' consideration. But if anybody wants to just comment on the whole thing first, I'll be glad to wait.
I just have some questions. You said that you pulled this from different places?
Right.
So the council meeting invocation procedures, where did that come from?
You know, I think that was Longview, primarily, and Clark County. Scott put this together pretty much, but again, those are kind of basic rules that we would establish if you wanted to have your staff put out there as far as rules that would be generally accepted.
So it was gleaned from a number of different,
I believe that's correct. I know that we'd actually looked at this before the Supreme Court decision came out, because we looked at this, 6 months ago, when we saw this coming as a Supreme Court decision, but yeah, we had looked at Longview, I think, and Clark County has a prayer.
did you look at Kelso?
I don't recall whether Kelso was one we looked at or not.
It's my understanding they've been doing this since 1953.
Is that right?
That's what I've been told.
Okay.
So they may not even have one.
Sorry?
They may not even have one.
A
That's right.
resolution?
Yeah, they made us do it by,
Yeah.
This council
How
used
they've
to do
always
one
done it, yeah.
years ago, and I don't believe we ever had one.
yeah, that's true.
So, no, go ahead.
Mayor Guard, do you happen to know why the prayer
That was
was
going to be my
pulled?
question.
It was after I was off the council. I believe it was actually instituted at the preference of a sitting mayor at the time.
It was actually, we did have an invocation when I first started as city attorney, and I think we had started having concerns about, issues of constitutionality, which now we have a clear answer to. And I think the consensus was that we would take it off.
Who did that? I understand that some of the council members would trade off during each.
As I recall, different council members led an invocation.
It was only council and mayor under Mayor Johnson.
I think the police chief did maybe a letter prayer to anybody that wanted to, was allowed to do it. We have any rules.
Yeah.
I think the general consensus was that, there could be constitutional issues, and it was, I can't remember if it was Mayor Crumpacker that decided to take it off, or just the council consensus. There was nothing formal, I don't think, that came up that said we don't want it anymore. It was just the general consensus and not put on the agenda anymore.
Okay, Joe?
Does it mention in here that, I haven't read it since this morning, who can participate? Do they have to be a citizen of Washougal or part of a church in Washougal?
Don't think that it's required to be a member of the church
Anyone.
or a citizen of Washougal, either one.
Okay,
Yeah, I believe under the procedures, the Exhibit A, it could be anybody. It has to be a person, though.
I don't think it would be appropriate
Versus
to say be a member
a
of a
dog.
church either.
No, what do you mean by that?
Well, if you've read the procedures, it isn't something where a church can put in and say, we will have someone there that night.
It has
It's
to
an
be an
individual.
The
has to be
actual
requested by an
individual has to be
individual.
the one to ask to be scheduled.
Gotcha.
Dave?
I've got a series of amendments here. Looking at the rules, not the resolution itself, but the rules for implementation. Rule number 1 there, I would move to limit it to 30 seconds.
30 seconds?
30 seconds. Am
Or
I-
how long does it take to read Psalm 23? I mean, so, I'm just wondering. 30 seconds is pretty fast.
My thought is that if you're asking, we're not, the goal here is not to have a prayer, it's to have an invocation, which
Define that, the difference.
I think the difference is, in an invocation, you're asking a higher power to bless what you're doing, provide guidance. You're submitting yourself to the greater wisdom, as opposed to a prayer, which might be a psalm. And I love some of those psalms. I love the 23rd Psalm. And I think the former is much more appropriate for a gathering like this.
It says not to exceed 2 minutes, so
Yes.
you could, some more brevity could be.
I would, if you can't get it done in 30 seconds, you can't get
Be
it
careful,
done.
there's a pastor in the audience, don't talk about that.
Invocation, the act of mentioning and
Boring.
referring to someone or something in support of your ideas. The act of invoking something, the act of asking for help or support, especially from a God, a prayer for blessing or guidance at the beginning of a service or ceremony.
Other questions?
Does anybody know how long the invocation is with our Congress?
You ever asked one of the 15 people that are actually there at that hour? I watch C-SPAN. It's a pretty empty chamber. Karen, did you have a question?
And so this will occur before the council meeting begins?
No, this would be part of the
Like
council meeting
at
agenda.
7?
After roll call, Pledge of
It
Allegiance?
used to be right after the Pledge of Allegiance.
I think that it was before roll call.
Before roll call,
I think that's right.
after the pledge.
We actually asked folks to remain standing for both the pledge and the
Right.
invocation.
I think that's the plan.
But I offer that for everybody's consideration. I'm not asking for a decision now. On item number 6, the second sentence, I'd like to strike church because it singles the church out and suggests a requirement for membership in the church. And I don't think that's appropriate. I think this is something that should be open to everybody. Although I suspect that most of the people that will come will be a member of a church. In item 7, I would like to strike paragraphs B and C because I think paragraph A is sufficient. It says what you need to say there.
Do we want to discuss these as you go?
We're not going to have time to discuss much in the next 2 minutes, so.
And that's why I just wanted to get through these. Item 8, strike listing of faith and/or congregation. Again, it divides rather than unites. And items 9 and 10, just a comment. And Don, I know we need to do this, but it pains me to see that such measures are necessary to protect the city from lawsuits resulting from the exercise of rights established, enshrined in the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. It just galls my soul.
So let me back up to, where in 8 were you talking about, Dave?
On 9 and, on
The last
number
line,
8,
faith congregation.
strike B and C.
No, it's
No,
7.
number 8.
Oh, number 8.
There's 2 places in there, it says faith and/or congregation.
Yeah, my comment there was strike the listing of faith and/or congregation.
Okay.
And because it's really not necessary, I don't think. Have I missed something there, Don?
It's probably one intended, Dave, to keep us out of trouble. By having a faith in there, you've now got something you can check back, somebody could check back on to say that we've been favoring one faith or one church or one something over another one.
It's a good point. My comments on item 10 apply, but it's a good point.
I understand.
Then, let me back up to 9 then, Dave. What was your issue there?
Okay?
It was just a general issue, Don, in regard to the fact that anybody even has to declare that.
Oh, I get you.
Given the fact that the Constitution gives them protection of being able to do that.
Sure.
Dave, on the number 6,
Yes.
church or third party, I'm pretty sure I know why that's in there. It just wants to make sure that it says you have to call yourself.
Okay, can we just say a third party?
That's what I was thinking. Or we can say an organization.
Oh, there you
Yeah.
go.
Yep.
It has, we just talked about that seconds ago. It has to be an individual to call up and ask for the opportunity. Your church secretary can't do it.
Which is what it says in the first sentence. I think the second sentence just clarifies that and says, in other words, you can't call and do that.
A third party's probably sufficient, because that's what an organization would be.
Again, I think it just re-clarifies it.
Thank you for tolerating
Since we're
my,
running out of time on this, can we bring it to the city council to finish it?
Yeah, we'll bring it back under, likely under either council, the council portion, or I'll put it on the regular agenda itself
Thank you.
as continued discussion.
I'm sorry, when is it coming back?
This evening, we'll continue the
Since we didn't
discussion this
finish
evening.
the
Finish,
discussion.
yep.
And at that point, you may have the benefit of Councilman Boger as well. Okay, so we will be adjourned right now from this meeting and back here in 30 minutes at 7 o'clock for our regular council meeting.